If you haven't heard of Genesis before, then don't worry. It's only been selling cars in the UK for just over a year. Genesis is the premium arm of the Hyundai group, in much the same way Audi is to Volkswagen or Lexus is to Toyota. And the first models it launched here were, well, rubbish is probably a bit harsh, but certainly nowhere near good enough to tempt you away from rivals. The GV80 luxury SUV suffered from a lumpy ride and had fuel economy that would have been disappointing 10 years ago, while the G70 Executive Saloon was a car that we described as being way off the pace.
So our expectations for the GV60, the South Korean brand's first bespoke electric car, were about as high as having some sun for filming today. But we couldn't have been more wrong, because this car is absolutely brilliant. In this video, I'm going to be telling you what's so good about it and why that for most buyers, this is an even better choice than the closely related Hyundai Ioniq 5 and Kia EV6. But before we get started, make sure you hit subscribe and turn on notifications. And for a great deal on your next new car, just head over to whatcar.com or Google What Car Deals. Right, so let's start with the outside, because the GV60 looks pretty distinctive, doesn't it? Back at the office, I've heard it described as looking like a spaceship and also a cartoon car. I'm not sure Genesis would be particularly happy with the latter, but it's because it's a jelly mold really. The styling is very friendly. There are no sharp creases or aggressive lines anywhere on the car. Is it an SUV? Well, it's got this silver wheel arch cladding here, and it sits a bit further from the road than cars like the Tesla Model 3, but it isn't as tall as, say, an Audi Q8 e-tron, and it's also got this swooping roof at the back here. So really, it's a mash-up between a coupe, an SUV, and just a plain old hatchback. We reckon its closest rivals are the Audi Q4 Sportback and Tesla Model Y. We've actually group tested those three cars against one another, which you can read by clicking the link up there at the top. Anyway, what do you think of the looks? Do you think GV60 looks great, or do you prefer the EV6, the Ioniq 5, or perhaps even the Tesla Model Y? Let us know in the comments below. As I've already said, the GV60 is based on the same underpinnings as the Ioniq 5 and EV6, but it's actually slightly shorter than those cars, only by about the length of this phone, but that is enough to impact on the amount of space inside, and I'll be talking about that a little bit more later on. If you like this colour, it's called Hanalma Mint. It's one of 10 metallic colours there are to choose from, and it costs £740, or you can spend £1,100 for one of 5 matte finishes. If you don't want to spend any money at all, then hopefully you like white, because that's the only standard colour that's available on the GV60. So plenty of colour choices, but not so much when it comes to alloys. If you go for the entry-level premium model, which is what this car is, then you get these 19-inch wheels. On the dual motor Sport, you get 20s, and on the Range Topping Sport Plus 21s, but there's only one design available on each version. Although if you are absolutely desperate to spend more money, Genesis will happily relieve you of £280 to paint the brake calipers. You can have those in white, copper, or on the Sport Plus, luminous yellow as well. Or you could spend that money on something a little bit more useful. And we'll be running you through our take on how to spec the perfect GV60 a little bit later. But I want to show you something else that's really cool about this car. It's called V2L, or Vehicle to Load, and it's an £880 option that brings a 3-pin domestic plug socket here under the rear seats, and also another converter that plugs into the charging port and gives you another 3-pin plug. Now, there's nothing particularly revolutionary about having a 3-pin plug in a car. You can get that on lots of different models. The difference here is how much power you can pull. So on a Volkswagen ID Buzz, for example, the plug socket in that car can deliver about 300 watts. That's enough to charge a couple of laptops, but not a lot else. This one here can deliver up to 3.5 kilowatts. And that's enough, believe it or not, to charge another electric car. So if you wanted, you could start your own EV recovery service.
And while we're on the subject of charging, all GV60s have a 77.4 kilowatt-hour battery, the same basic one that's in the Ioniq 5 and EV6. It can theoretically go from 10 to 80% charge in less than 20 minutes at speeds of up to 239 kilowatts, although that would require all the stars to align, the right battery temperature, a powerful enough charger, and so on and so forth. A full 0 to 100% charge at home using a regular 7 kilowatt wall box will take around 12 hours.
Now let's face it, Genesis in the UK at least doesn't have the brand cachet of Audi, BMW or Mercedes. So not that many people are going to choose this over the slightly cheaper Ioniq 5 or EV6 unless it does something demonstrably better. Well, there are actually several things it does better, but number one amongst those is definitely this interior. I mean, look at it, it's absolutely stunning. Barely any hard plastics to speak of at all. And there are some really nice features like this crystal ball that when you press the start button spins upside down to reveal the gear selector. And there's loads of metal detailing as well on the center console here, on the dashboard, and on the insides of the doors. In fact, it's quite reminiscent of a Bentley, and that's probably no coincidence because Bentley's former design director actually now works for Genesis. You can have this cream steering wheel, cream seats, and two-tone dashboard without paying any extra. But we'd actually recommend stumping up for the optional Napa leather interior pack, which this car has. It costs about £2,300 and it gives you these quilted leather seats, absolutely lovely, quite similar again to what you find in a Bentley actually. And you also get this suede-like material on the pillars here, on the headlining and on the sun visors. Small details, but it helps lift the interior even higher above anything else that's in this price point. And the interior isn't just about looks and plush materials, it's been fantastically well thought out. We're always moaning in modern cars about fiddly touch-sensitive aircon controls. So what has Genesis done? It's given you some proper knobs and buttons, and big, clearly marked ones as well. So if I want to adjust the interior temperature while I'm driving, I don't have to risk crashing. All I have to do is that. Couldn't be easier. And it's the same story with the infotainment system. Most modern cars, including the Ioniq 5 and EV6, have touchscreen only systems. Good ones, admittedly, but it's still far from ideal trying to press an icon on a screen when you're driving. The GV60 has a touchscreen, and it's a good one actually. The operating system's quite intuitive. There are nice big tiles here to swap between functions. But just as you get in some high-end BMWs, there's also a secondary rotary controller down here, and that is much easier and safer to use while you're driving. You just twist it like this to move around the screen and press it down when you've chosen what you want to do. It will have cost Genesis more money to install this secondary controller, but the car is all the better for it, and we wish more manufacturers would do the same. You get all the gadgets you'd expect, including Apple CarPlay and Android Auto smartphone mirroring as standard. So the only infotainment related option is the optional B&O sound system. It has 17 speakers. It's absolutely brilliant. It costs £990. The only thing is, all of the test cars we've had from Genesis so far have had that system fitted. So I can't tell you for sure whether it's worth the extra over the standard system. Now, when the GV60 was launched in 2022, it cost around about the same as the Kia EV6. It's gone up quite a bit for 2023, almost £7,000, and that's not a good thing, but there is some justification because you now get more standard equipment. The biggest thing you get is the comfort seat pack. That gives you fully electric memory seats in the front that are heated as well as ventilated. They have adjustable side bolsters and can even give you a massage. Plus, if you're feeling a little bit tired while you're waiting for your GV60 to charge, you can push a button on the side of the seat here and convert it into a makeshift bed. There are a couple of annoying things about this car though. So if you want to change from reverse to drive or vice versa, you have to make sure your foot is pressed down quite hard on the brake pedal. If you're just feathering it to keep things smooth, then it won't make the change and you'll get told off by the car.
Press brake pedal to change gear.
Also, in most electric cars, Teslas, VWs, Volvos, whatever, when you've finished your journey, you just put the car in park and it goes into standby. From there, you can either put the gearbox back into drive and set off again, or you can get out of the car, lock it and go and do some shopping or whatever. If you do that in the GV60 and you get out and let's just say you want to let your kids out of the back, you will find the door locked. So you have to get back into the car and actually turn the car off using the start-stop button before you can get out, lock it or open the rear doors. And that's quite annoying, a bit of an unnecessary step in an electric car because after all, there's no petrol engine to switch off, but it is something you'll get used to pretty quickly. For 2023, you also now get the rear comfort seat pack as standard. That gives you heated, although not ventilated, seats in the back and laminated side glass as well. The seats themselves, very comfortable. You can adjust the angle of the backrests by pulling a lever here, and the seating position's a bit more natural than it is in the Ioniq 5, although there's no doubt that car has quite a bit more space in the back. I'm just over 6 foot. This seat in front is set up for my driving position and it's absolutely fine, but it doesn't have the limo-like room that you get in the back of an Ioniq 5 or an EV6 actually as well. And because of that coupe-esque roofline at the back, if I want to sit back in the seat, then my head does get pretty close to the roofline. So for most buyers, rear space will be absolutely fine, but if it's a priority, you might want to look elsewhere. The boot isn't vast either. It's a little bit smaller than an EV6's, which in turn is way smaller than a Tesla Model Y's, although it's still bigger than, say, a Volkswagen Golf, perhaps a little bit disappointing given the size of this car. It's quite shallow, although there is some underfloor storage and also some extra storage under the bonnet as well. So again, plenty for a lot of buyers, but perhaps not if you want to go on camping holidays. Now, as I've already said, this is the entry-level premium version, and it has a single 225 brake horsepower electric motor driving the rear wheels, and it's pretty nippy. It's not a Tesla, it's not going to have your passenger screaming when you floor the accelerator pedal, but in our test it did 0 to 60 in about 7.5 seconds, and that's perfectly fast enough for what's essentially a family SUV. If you are desperate for more power, there are two more levels of spiciness in the GV60 range. There's the Sport, that has a second electric motor on the front axle, so it's four-wheel drive and it can do 0 to 62 in 5.5 seconds. And then right at the top of the range, there's the Sport Plus. That's also four-wheel drive. It has 483 bhp and that can do 0 to 62 in 4 seconds. So that really is Tesla quick. But actually, it's this entry-level version that's the best to drive in most respects. Its smaller wheels mean it rides a bit better than other GV60s, and also other rivals like the Kia EV6 as well, and it's way more comfortable than the Tesla Model Y. It actually strikes a really nice balance between the slightly sportier, firmer EV6 and the softer, not particularly agile Ioniq 5. It's not what you call fun to drive really, but it's very pleasant. It steers nicely, has plenty of grip, and the brake pedal is also more predictable than it is in a lot of electric cars, so it's easy to slow down smoothly. As for the range, this version can do a claimed 321 miles on a charge. That drops to 292 miles on the Sport and 289 miles on the Sport Plus. That's because those versions are heavier and they have bigger wheels. Of course, you won't actually get that far in the real world in any of them, but we reckon about 240 miles should be quite possible on a chilly January day like today in this version, as long as you aren't hammering it along a motorway, and around 280 miles on a nice summer's day. But here's our take on how to spec the perfect GV60. Go for the entry-level premium model. As well as being the most comfortable and quietest version of the GV60, it has the longest range, and as a bonus, it's also the cheapest. Do add the optional Napa leather interior pack. It isn't outrageously expensive given the price of the car, particularly if you're signing up to a monthly PCP finance agreement, and it helps make the interior feel even more luxurious than anything else in the class. Don't bother with the optional digital mirrors. As well as pushing the price up, we found it harder to judge distances than it is with these conventional mirrors, although we would recommend spending an extra £80 for these auto-dimming versions to save yourself getting dazzled at night. So overall, the GV60 is a brilliant electric car. Yes, it's more expensive than the EV6 and the Ioniq 5, but it justifies that with its stunning interior, more comfortable ride, and quieter cruising manners. Plus, because of this car's slower predicted depreciation, it won't actually cost you that much more in monthly PCP finance repayments. But for lots more information about the GV60, just head over to our website, whatcar.com, and read our detailed written review. There should be a link up there at the top somewhere. We hope you've enjoyed this review. If you have, we'd really appreciate it if you give it a like. Leave us a comment below if you've got any other questions about the GV60. And other than that, we'll see you next time.